Okay, so let's transition into very lightly guided settling meditation. Finding a posture that reflects our inner dignity and Buddha nature. Allowing the body to make those fine-tuned adjustments to its sitting position so that we can become even just 10% more comfortable and grounded. And let's take 3 deep breaths together, beginning with a full exhale, and then inspiring, and then exhaling slowly and smoothly. And again, an inhale that fills the belly and the chest, and a long, smooth exhale. And once more on our own. And then allowing the breath to take care of itself. Dropping any need to control or manage the breath. Just observing the natural, gentle flow on the way in and on the way out. And noticing the flow of our inner experience from the standpoint of a neutral, friendly observer. Almost like you're in your favorite lazy boy, just flipping on the TV, see what's on tonight. Notice that the attention has drifted into thoughts of the past or future. We can celebrate that we notice that and recenter the attention on the feeling of the breath, our anchor into the present moment. With our eyes either closed or partway open, let's just begin to shift our focus from our inner experience, from our TV show, to the circle of practitioners gathered here this evening. Knowing that you belong here, just as you are, right now. Just like mental clarity and peace are not obscured by passing clouds of thought or thunderstorms of emotion. Like that, we can know that belonging is our natural state programmed into our DNA to belong. There's nothing that needs to be done or accomplished, but rather seeing if we can simply rest in that sense of belonging, the warm hug.
Nikki, what are you doing?
last few moments in this meditation, perhaps feeling, accepting, loving presence of our circle of wise spiritual friends who have gathered here tonight, knowing deeply that we belong to each other.
Okay, I wanted to just read some acknowledgements. This first one is a land acknowledgement, which is from IMCC's website. So for thousands of years, the Monacan Nation lived on protected and cultivated land on which Charlottesville and the surrounding communities now stand. This land was forcibly seized by white-bodied settler colonizers. We at the Insight Meditation Community of Charlottesville acknowledge the profound suffering inflicted on the Monacan people, past, present, and future. As a result of these acts and as a result of policies rooted in erasure, we recognize the relationship of the Monacan people of the present day have with the land where their ancestors were buried. We also wanted to offer an acknowledgement for our Asian ancestry and origin. So may we acknowledge the origin and lineages of Buddhism, which trace back thousands of years to our Southeastern Asian ancestors. May we invite a deep respect for the cultural roots of the practice that guides and allows our connection today. And finally, I wanted to offer a labor acknowledgement. So in acknowledgement of the privilege of this gift of our time together and of the ability to take time away from work or unpaid labor responsibilities like caregiving, we also want to recognize the debt to exploited workers past and present. This includes our nation's history of exploitation of enslaved people, primarily of African descent, Chinese immigrants who built railways for westward American development, Japanese Americans who were incarcerated during World War II, and migrant workers from the Philippines, Mexico, Central and South America who have worked farms and canneries. We also recognize that our economy continues to rely on the exploited labor of incarcerated people, largely people of color, who earn only pennies an hour. So I wanted to offer these acknowledgements just to kind of set the stage for the type of inclusion that we're working for. Matt and I both feel, well, I'll speak for myself. I feel strongly that in order to create a sense of belonging, we really need to acknowledge the past that we're coming from and also allow people to show up with all of their identities and to feel like they belong exactly as they are without having to hide parts of themselves. And so what these acknowledgements say is that we're not going to be stepping away from hard conversations about parts of things that may not be typically comfortable. So thank you all for participating in that with me.
Thanks, Sarah. So as Sarah said, we're going to tag team a little bit just with a few thoughts around the topic of belonging, and then we'll have the group activity. Yes, the desire for belonging is rooted in evolution. For thousands of years, survival depended on close ties to a group. And wandering off could lead to starvation, predation, or the inability to reproduce. So that really served us well. Those fight or flight kind of responses and threats are responses to threats of belonging. But in modern times, where we've reduced these physical risks, the deep psychological need to belong has endured. This is especially true in a time of cultural polarization, where there's erosion of social institutions, there's remote work, longer hours. All of these have made belonging harder to achieve and have taken a real toll on our collective well-being. And you're probably aware of these stats, or at least in general the trends, but loneliness has become so widespread that our former Surgeon General Vivek Murthy labeled it a public health crisis that was exacerbated by the pandemic. And it turns out that in national surveys, 36% of Americans feel persistently lonely, and many report fewer closer friendships than ever, and 12% report no friendships at all. So in other words, you're not alone in feeling alone, if that applies to you. But fortunately, we can decrease loneliness and take steps toward fulfilling our need to belong. Sebene Selassie in a Spirit Rock talk said, "Belonging includes understanding our histories, addressing our conditioning, facing our shadows, and loving ourselves, each other, everything. We belong to it all." So I'm going to pivot a little bit now to just have a reflection on belonging through a Buddhist lens and how this connects with something called queer theory. The thing about queer theory is it doesn't really have much to do with being queer. It's more of an approach. And so this is not, what I'm going to share is not about trying to get you to adopt political views or to stray too much into academic frameworks and boring stuff like that, but rather to encourage an exploration of how we look at identity and how we hold ideas of normal, who gets to decide what's normal, and whether these ideas create ease or whether they create suffering. So at its simplest, queer theory asks a very Buddhist question, which is, what happens when we cling to fixed categories, especially about who people are meant to be? So this invites us to notice how binaries like male and female, normal, abnormal, belonging and othering are often treated as solid and natural, when in fact they are constructed, conditioned, and learned. So from a Dharma perspective, we might say that these ideas rise due to causes and conditions, to karma. And like all things, they're impermanent. So this is where there's resonance with many aspects of the Buddha Dharma and this notion of queer theory. So first of all, the concept of anatta, or no fixed self, reminds us that identity is not a static thing. So gender, like personality or preference, arises with conditions and changes over time. And then impermanence tells us that clinging to rigid identities, our own or others, creates suffering. And then we have the principle of ahimsa, or non-harm, which asks us to be aware of subtle harms. These might be microaggressions, they might be assumptions or exclusions, or even language that wounds without the intention to do so. And then lastly, bodhicitta, the aspiration to reach enlightenment for the benefit of all, bodhicitta calls us to respond when we see suffering, not by turning away, but with compassion and responsibility. So seen in this way, this questioning of fixed ideas of gender, and it doesn't have to be limited to gender. It could be things like around age. It could be around other identities and intersectionalities of identities. These are not a distraction from our practice. They are our practice. And so in terms of how rigidly held beliefs and societal norms cause suffering, these are kind of invisible harms to those who are affected, but those who don't fit these societal norms, they can be constricting and painful. And the Buddha taught, of course, to investigate suffering at its source. And queer theory gives us language to one source, which is unexamined ideas of normalcy. This is not about blame, it's about awareness of our own tendencies. And personally, I had to go through a long period of reckoning with having had a racist grandfather who litigated against the Black Panthers. That led to some deeply ingrained, unconscious things that were hard to let go of. But so this language provided by queer theory can help us as individuals and as Sangha to a greater awareness of the suffering that can arise from rigid ideas of gender or other identities. So again, back to Sevene Selassie, she sees as a key curiosity, the desire to know and the willingness to learn. That curiosity is vital for belonging. This could be curiosity around our own responses. It could be curiosity around someone else's experience. Just a couple more thoughts. So in Mahayana Buddhism, the so-called Great Vehicle, we talk about the concept of skillful means. So this is responding wisely to the causes of suffering in front of us. And listening deeply is not about centering our ego, it's about directing compassion to where suffering is present in a skillful way. So inclusion then is not an external value added on to the Dharma, it's an embodied expression of it. So I'm gonna transition over to Sarah in a moment, but just a couple of inquiries that I'll leave you with, gentle inquiries. Where might we be holding fixed ideas about gender, identity, or belonging without noticing? And what would it feel like to loosen our grip, not to erase difference, but to meet it with curiosity, humility, and care? If the fruit of practice is less suffering and more freedom, this might be one place where the Dharma is asking us to look more closely. Turn it over to Sarah.
Thanks, Matt. I think one of the richest parts of what you shared was around fixed self for me, and I wanted to kind of dig into our attachment to our identities and kind of what we feel like, well, that's just who I am, that's just part of me, and kind of working through that deconditioning. And I wanted to look at it through a lens of race. Recently, I'm part of a racial affinity group at IMCC, and just part of the world, I was recently reintroduced to this idea of the one drop rule. And so that sent me down on a rabbit hole because I was like, wait a minute, there's so many people who have one drop and they identify as white. And so then I kind of went down this history rabbit hole. And so I just wanted to kind of present this idea to kind of use as a lens, which is that even these things that we consider to be fixed, like our race, our whiteness, these definitions have changed over time. And so before the American Civil War, free individuals of mixed race could be legally considered white if they had either 1/8 of African ancestry or only 1/4 in Virginia. And so as we know, being in Charlottesville, Thomas Jefferson has fathered 6 mixed race children with Sally Hemings, who was a slave, and her children were 3/4 white. she was 3/4 white, excuse me, making her children 7/8 European ancestry. And under the Virginia law at the time, they would have been legally considered white if they were able to be free. Since they were born to a slave, they were slaves. Some of them, Thomas Jefferson freed upon his death, and some of them escaped. So there was 4 children that made it to adulthood, and 3 of those actually integrated into white society, and those descendants identify as white. And during this period of the post-antebellum, we still had this idea that if you had mostly white ancestry, you would be considered white. And it wasn't until the 20th century that we were introduced with this racial integrity laws and the one-drop rule was implemented. And so suddenly that definition of whiteness is changing. And we've also seen through history that when Irish immigrants came and Italian immigrants came and Jewish immigrants as well, they were not considered white when they first arrived, but as they assimilated, they were also grouped into this white identity. And so as we think about these things that are hard to grapple with, like, well, my identity is white because I am white, I just want to kind of put this lens around it of that's because we as a society are deciding what that means. Thinking about it from a lens of ability and disability, we think of people with disabilities as being a group of people, but disability is actually like a legal definition. It is if the government approves that you can have accommodation, you can have a chronic illness, or you can have things that require you to need care. But if the federal government doesn't approve you to be disabled, then you technically aren't considered disabled. So just thinking about those fixed identities in that lens of who decided that this is our definition, and do I agree with it, and how does that sit with me? I think is going to be really helpful in deconditioning these things, just knowing that, we as Buddhists know that these things are concepts and they're made up, but like having real grounding in what it is, how it's made up, I think is really helpful. I want to kind of jump a little bit into why I believe this is important, and also kind of this paradox of diversity and inclusion. When we're working with diversity, we're really prioritizing and valuing folks' differences. And sometimes when we think about inclusion, we just want to get everyone in the same room. And typically, one of the things you hear about inclusion without that value of diversity, it's like inviting everyone to the dinner party, and when they offer to bring the food that's good for them, you say, oh no, I don't want your food, I just want you to sit at my table and eat my food and do things how I do things. When we're trying to bring people in and we really want to value their contributions, it's making sure that they can bring their full selves, they can bring those parts of them that make them different. And so, when we're kind of moving towards valuing both diversity and inclusion and trying to stay away from that role of assimilation, it's really making sure people feel they can show up as their full selves and can be a part of the community that we've built, but also be themselves. I think one of the pieces that's really important for this work, and I want to give you all permission, is how we do this is we adjust how we're showing up in our communities based off who is in the room. I think the meditation you gave, Matt, pointed to this really well, is that we all belong here. Everyone belongs here equally. Each individual person belongs to IMCC, and you also belong to this specific moment. This moment, this group of people will likely never happen again. And so this is a particular moment that we all belong to each other, and it doesn't have to look like the next time we get together on a Tuesday night. And so I think I just want to give permission that things don't have to look the same all the time for you to be included in the group, or for the group to include someone else. I am giving you permission to change things up and make it look different, to make the people who are in the room feel like they belong. I wanted to just kind of point out IMCC's mission and bring it back home from there. So our mission is to offer Buddhist teachings, the Dharma, support meditation practice, and opportunities for open-hearted discussion with people of all backgrounds and beliefs. We gather in community, Sangha, to cultivate greater awareness, joy, compassion, and freedom from suffering. as a Sangha, even if we're intentionally or unintentionally excluding people, what we're communicating to them is that what we're communicating is that we are deciding who is allowed to be free from judgment and who is not. And I know that is never our intention. And so I do truly believe that this call to diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice is a call to free all beings from suffering. And I think we need to make space for everyone here because everyone deserves that freedom from suffering. So with all of that heaviness that I've just laid on you, I want to move into our small group discussions. As a reminder for the discussions, I want to make sure everyone is prioritizing wise speech. Be very kind to each other. These topics can be emotional, and I think prioritizing that connection with the other person is going to be the most fruitful for you. It's not necessary to share every thought that you have, but making sure that you're making that connection is. I wanted to share a adapted consent statement that we read in Ruth King's racial affinity groups, and then I will send you out to chat with each other. So this work is a call to those who care deeply, people who want to go the distance by making a difference from the inside out. To begin, we must take a deep breath and consent to this journey. We must be willing to exchange comfort for consciousness and to be more curious than critical or discouraged. If we didn't belong to you, we wouldn't be leading this. If you didn't belong to us, you wouldn't be here. I am you and you are me, but we don't know that yet. We are here sharing this work to embrace our membership in each other's lives, to discover our wholeness, and to remember that we belong. Be willing to be a light and let your heart lead the way. So we're going to have about a 15-minute breakout group, small group discussion. Sorry, I'm in Zoom mode in my head. The questions that we'll be working with are: how do these Buddhist teachings of impermanence, non-self, compassion, and compassion support inclusivity? Have you had a moment when a teaching or experience helped you see identity in a more expansive way? And then lastly, Matt and I are curious if there is one small change that our Sangha could make to increase your sense of belonging, something that's practical, compassionate, and doable, what would that look like? So those are 3 rich questions. You don't have to hit all of them.
You want to read them again?
I do.
Okay.
So those questions are: how do these Buddhist teachings of impermanence, non-self, and compassion support inclusivity? Have you had a moment when a teaching or experience helped you see identity more expansively? And what is one small change our Sangha could make to increase a sense of belonging?
I think we have time for just one more short comment from Zoom or here in the room.
One thing that our group spoke to that is one small thing we could do is how white our Tuesday night meetings are in terms of the kind of structure, the form, the person who brought it up spoke to the absence of music or song, and I found that really useful. You know, it's like it's a very white, sedate culture that we offer most Tuesday nights. Maybe we could fiddle with that a little bit.
Thank you for that, Sharon. I think there are some. Just wanted to thank Sharon for that. And, you know, I was just noting in my mind that there are some aspects of diversity that are more visible and others that are invisible.
Thank you all. And yes, thank you, Sharon, for that comment. I have a little mission accomplished moment with that.
Actually, I wonder, Matt, could you just say two more sentences about some aspects are visible, some are invisible?
Sure. You know, I'm a gay man. I think I pass as straight. That is a less visible or invisible source of potential exclusion. Things like wealth or lack thereof, are a less visible form of diversity. And just to share my own experience, sometimes I even wish that my identities were more visible, because it's easier for me to hide when my often marginalized identities are not as visible. That was probably more than two sentences, but
Thank you. Perfect.
I'll just briefly add that that was exactly what I was trying to point to earlier when talking about we want people to be able to show up as their full selves. We want them to be able to bring, whether it's marginalized, dominant culture, non-dominant culture aspects, or just parts of themselves that don't fit into a come and sit and listen to a Dharma talk type of format. We just want people to be able to awaken in every way that they can. I appreciate everyone's willingness to participate and indulge Matt and I in this fun experiment. I'm going to close us out with a dedication of merit. Do you have anything else you want to add? Okay. This is a dedication of merit that I've adapted from Ruth King's affinity groups as well as the One Earth Sangha. I've just kind of pulled my two, all my favorite bits of that together. So may all places be held sacred. May all beings be cherished. May all injustices of oppression, devalidation, and theft be fully righted, remedied, and healed. May we heal from the seeds of separation inherited from our ancestors in gratitude for this life they have given us. May all who are captured by hatred be freed to love that is their birthright. May all who are bound by fear discover the safety of understanding. May all who are weighed down by grief be given over to the joy of being. May all who are lost in delusion find home on the path of wisdom. May all wounds to forests, earth, deserts, oceans, all wounds to the Mother Earth be lovingly restored to bountiful health. May all beings delight in whale song, bird song, and blue sky. May all beings find home in peace and well-being. May all beings without exception benefit from our growing awareness. May all beings, including ourselves, be happy and free. Thank you all.